right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Chiefly Football Podcast. I am the underqualified host, Kinloch. Dave is joining me again this week as we recap the Chiefs draft. In this episode, we're just going to go give our observations on the Chiefs draft process and kind of how it compares to previous drafts to maybe see if we can project how the Chiefs are going to be using the players that they drafted. Before we get into that, make sure to check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, @ChieflyFootball. Give us a follow, and if you're on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. And also, we really want to hear from you guys. This was a big week for the Chiefs' future. And we really love to hear what you guys thought of the moves that Veach made, and just kind of your observations on this. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment for us. Just give us the pick that you thought that you love the best and why you're excited for that player. We're going to go through some of the players that we really liked from the Chiefs draft. So Dave, let's just go ahead and jump into it. We're not going to take too much time. We don't want to spend 3 hours because we definitely could on all these players and stuff, but we got a whole off season to break down all of these players, and we're actually going to see them on the field in Chiefs uniform in rookie minicamp this coming weekend. So we can definitely go more in depth with all of these players, and as they participate in team activities, we can start to see how the Chiefs are going to start using them. But today we're just going to do a brief overview of the players that they drafted and just see if we can get into the mind of Veach and Coach Reed and see how these guys will help the Chiefs get to the Super Bowl again this season. So, Dave, it's good to see you again. The draft is obviously a huge part of the NFL. It's where the teams stock up with young talent, and it can make or break a team's depending on the position. I mean, quarterbacks, if you get the quarterback wrong, you're set back for the next 5 years. And with the Tyreek Hill trade, what's that?
At least.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them have been set back for 20 years. So.
Yeah, especially when they just keep getting it wrong over and over again. And we talked about going into the draft Tyreek Hill, and he was obviously such a monumental piece in the Chiefs' success over the last few years. And Brett Veach's and Coach Reed's decision to trade him away, yeah, they got a lot of picks, but trading one of your pillars of your Chiefs team that's been so successful the last 4 years, it was pretty risky, especially if you're trying to win a Super Bowl this season. So how did you feel like overall the Chiefs did, given the extra picks that they had from the Tyreek Hill trade, and the holes that they had to fill going into the draft?
Yeah. One of the things that, I love the draft. I love the fact that we had picks. It got a little bit slow there towards the end until we rolled back into the 7th round, but and at least Veach, pulled the trigger and moved up got a 5th round pick, or we would have been sitting there for quite a while. And he saw value there and the need to make that pick as well with Darian Kennard, which, a lot of people are really, really liking that pick. And let's preface this. This is fun to talk about these players right now, but we totally get that none of them have hit the NFL field yet. But this is, this is Christmas. This is the opportunity to think about the potential of what these players can do and how they can contribute, which is awesome. Some of them may not, but Veach has had a pretty successful track record, and I think you'll allude to it maybe a little bit later, that the consensus is that this Chiefs draft pick was one of the top, which is amazing considering where the Chiefs have picked and where they've picked for the last now 4 seasons as a result of the success that they've had. And for Veach to do what he did, again, on paper, but this is just like hiring anybody else. It's always, you never know. You just look at somebody's track record of success and what your culture is, and you're trying to hire the best person that you can, and HRs don't get it right, and certainly the NFL GMs don't get it right. Ask previous regimes in New York, they both couldn't get out of their own ways. But I'm stoked about what they did. I think to circle back what you talked about, Tyreek, is we have to keep in mind Tyreek was not going to play this year. He was going to sit out. He was going to be a distraction. Him staying here was never an option. So the question is Veach able to maximize the results that he got? Plus, we got $20 million under the salary cap, which is, that's significant considering where we are as well. That just creates a lot more flexibility. So yeah, if we want to start talking about them, I'll say one more thing. And I always liken it to the real world and working for companies. Hopefully some of us that have had the opportunity to work with just a fantastic leadership or management team that knew what they were doing, that they had vision, and that you could trust in their decisions. And that made your job coming to work so much easier because you knew you were contributing to something that was going to grow, as opposed to working for a business that you looked around you and saw incompetent management. You saw the way customers were being treated. You saw how processes were broken. And we see those same type of things in the NFL. The difference is we can see them in the win-loss column. And we are so lucky to have Veach and Reed and just the whole team that they've developed, and the culture that they've created, and the success that they've had. We're talking 4 AFC championships in a row, and we're still looking to compete year after year. Everybody looks at the Patriots, and they've been the exception in the NFL. So for the Chiefs to come even close to doing that, to dominating the AFC West, that's a tribute to just how good the leadership of the Chiefs are. So I'm going to jump off my management soapbox and turn it back to you.
Yeah, no, I love that though, because especially just the way Reed and Veach work together, they're on the same page all the time. And you just see that's where the dysfunction happens on other teams, is when the head coach and the general manager have 2 different ideas of the direction that the franchise should go. And there's that power struggle because the GM has his responsibilities of building the team, and then the coach has to deal with the players that the GM gives him. And if he doesn't like the players, then there's just that tension there. And so that's why you see most NFL teams struggle, because it's hard to get the GM and the head coach on the same page. It's easy for like the Patriots because the GM and the head coach is the same person. But what Bill O'Brien tried that with the Texans, and it was a complete disaster. So even Coach Reed, when he started to take on those GM responsibilities in Philadelphia, and it got a little too overwhelming for him, and his coaching suffered as a result. But you did mention, just I think before we get into the players, just kind of how the experts, or just how the media in general kind of viewed the Chiefs draft. Luckily, there was somebody, I saw it on Reddit, but heard it on the radio. Somebody put together like a there's like this table, and it just took all of the grades from all of the different websites. And you had Mel Kiper and from ESPN, PFF, and all these different sites, and put it together, and just who in general had the best grades. And Kansas City came in 4th, and they got let's see, their GPA was 3.72.
And they were basing it just like you do in grades, A through F, A plus. So
yeah.
this was our cumulative grade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so somehow, let's see, the Jets and the Ravens were 1 and 2, and they got over 4.0. So they were taking some honors classes and stuff.
And they did do well. Both of those teams drafted well.
Yep. And the Eagles were just ahead of us at 3, but the Eagles and the Jets, I think they mostly got their grades based off of just the star power that they were able to get. And the Jets had 2 first-round picks in the top, 10, 15? So they were able to get their stars, and then they were able to trade up early in the second round. They had so many picks, and they were so high that, as long as they made smart picks with players, then they were going to do well. And the same with the Eagles. I mean, they had the big trade during the draft that kind of shook the NFL, trading for A.J. Brown. So I think that factored into their draft grade because they were able to get such a great receiver who's proven himself in the NFL and plugs one of their holes and makes their offense a lot better. So I think the Ravens and the Chiefs kind of did it the old-fashioned way, or just, the way that you want, or the way that you see long-term success with teams is when they're more methodical, where they let the draft come to them. They make smart picks. They don't get impatient and trade a bunch of picks to move up to take a player because they're panicking that they're not going to fall to them. So the Ravens are masters at that. And that's why they've had such a long stretch of success over, 20 plus years. And then the Chiefs did a great job. Like you said, they're picking at the end of the round each day. And so the fact that they were able to get high value players without having to move up was a huge win for the Chiefs, and especially PFF. I mean, we use their rankings a lot, and they absolutely loved what the Chiefs did, and they talked about how their rankings, where they had them and where the Chiefs picked them, and how great the value was for each of them. So overall, just a really good draft by most accounts for the Kansas City Chiefs. And going into the draft, it's really hard. I mean, the draft is hard on so many levels, especially when you're drafting that late in the first round. You don't know exactly how the draft is going to play out once you get through the first 15 picks. So you have to be really flexible. You have to have a lot of options and be prepared for plan A's through Z to know, what you want to do when your time is up. But one of the biggest things, and I love that the Chiefs were able to do this, is teams can have a philosophy where they mainly make their picks based off the needs that they have on their team, or a team will just pick whoever the best player is available. And so sometimes if you're picking based off need, that's where a lot of teams get into trouble. Like if you reach for a quarterback who doesn't deserve to be taken in the first round, that means he's probably not going to be good enough to be your starter immediately. And so that just sets off a chain reaction of things happening for your team where your quarterback's not set up for success, and that sets your team back for several years. I think the Raiders were a huge example of that with John Gruden, and they were consistently reaching for players that they had no business being drafted at those times, but the Raiders felt like they filled a hole on their roster. And 4 years into a 10-year contract, John Gruden's out of Las Vegas. But the Ravens are actually an excellent example of teams that just let the board come to them, and they'll just pick whoever the best player available is for them. And that way you can just stockpile talent. You can just get the best players there, and it just gives you some more flexibility. Maybe you make trades, or maybe you can move the positions around or move players around where you can use all of their talents. So, but interestingly, I think Veach did a great job of picking the best players that were available and not having to reach, while also filling the holes that the Chiefs had. And Dave, before the draft, we did our episode, the preview, and we went through the 5 basically positions that the Chiefs needed to address this offseason. And obviously Veach is one of our 24 listeners, because he went and picked and hammered really each of those positions multiple times. So I thought he just did an excellent job in blending, filling the needs of the team with getting great value with where they were picking.
Yeah, because like you said in his presser, the board fell to him, and it doesn't always happen that way, that the players fall to you that just happen to also be the players that you're in need of. And, or in the instance of Trent McDuffie jumping up and being able to get him. But for the most part, he acknowledged that, the players that they were wanting were there, at those spots that worked for them.
Yeah. So going into the draft, the Chiefs had 12 draft picks. They ended up making 10 picks just because of a couple of trades that they made. The first one they made with the Patriots, I believe, and moving up to take Trent McDuffie at pick 21. Trent McDuffie is a corner out of University of Washington, a little bit undersized, which is really the only main knock against him. But I mean, he was expected by most people to go in the top 20, maybe even top 15. So I think when Veach saw that he had fallen to 21, that they decided to make that move, because he definitely wasn't going to last until 29 when they were picking.
Yeah, and in fact, he even acknowledged that they didn't have a plan for McDuffie because they weren't anticipating him falling that far. So he said, he even talked about it, like you had mentioned, they're trying to create every contingency they can in a draft, especially in that first round on day one. But they hadn't done anything with him. And so when he fell, that's when they had to start making phone calls and finding what that value was with regards to being able to package some picks to move up where they thought they would need to go to get to him. And because if I recall right, there was somebody who ended up picking a corner shortly thereafter. And I think that they kind of anticipated when they saw McDuffie falling that they wanted him, but they knew somebody else was going to try to possibly move up for him as well. And so they kind of just figured out who they could go to, and then started making, it was really interesting. If you listen to Veach's press conference, then, people are here, they're out starting to make phone calls, not only with the Patriots, but before and after the teams that were picking around them, just to find out, is that pick available, and, and then putting together compensation. So it would be awesome to get in a war room and listen to how those things are coming back, because they got to be super fluid. And, we sit back and we're just, we madden it, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, we're just going down, but it really is true business management process that they're having to go through in making those decisions at that very moment. And not only doing that, but you still have to execute it. You might know that you want them there, but then the question is how do you get them? All the time the clock is running. Other competitors are doing the same thing. And, we really don't give enough credit to what those guys do. They make it, and we perceive it to be way easier than it is. And there's a reason that only 32 people can do it in the NFL. And even half of those are struggling to make it work.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And I think, most teams, or all the teams, they kind of have an idea of, like you said, they have contingency plans, and the Chiefs were reported beforehand to have been interested in moving up. So all teams, they kind of know, based on different situations, if they want to move up or move back, and what kind of range they can afford to move up to or move back to. And so before the draft, they've already made kind of some agreements, I guess, they've already spent that time negotiating with a lot of these teams. And I'm sure that the Chiefs had already talked with the Patriots leading up to the draft saying, hey, if we were interested in moving up, what would it take? Let's consider that. And then when the time comes, if we want to make a move up, this is what we're going to offer. And then they kind of come to a soft agreement before that happens. And you do that with several teams interested.
But that's got to be so fluid, right? Because then all of a sudden New England's like, hey, no, we've got somebody who's falling to us that we want to keep. And you did hit upon it. Veach in his pre-draft press conference did mention, that if they move up, he anticipating it being in that 19, 20, 21 spot. Literally called his shot when he acknowledged that they probably weren't going to be able, they didn't want to spend the resources to that were going to be necessary to move in the top 15 or let alone the top 10. So you definitely are correct that he kind of understood, hey, this is what it was going to take to get into those spots, but still, you got to hope that team that you're wanting to work with or maybe had some conversation with before are still open to that. Because that's just crazy.
Yeah, and the Patriots are kind of natural trade partners because they love to trade out of the first round, gather more picks, and just load up on players. But again, like what if another team wanted to move into that spot and offered the Patriots more? Just things like that are always coming up. So
I think it was the Bills who ended up taking a corner shortly thereafter, and I think Veach had alluded that they knew that was coming, or that's what they anticipated. Who else is going to need, and how do we get up there? And you're wondering were the Bills trying to talk to somebody and move up? Were the Bills talking to New England and Belichick's like, nope, not happening, not in our division, or something. I would be curious to know, what was going on behind the other scenes of people who were wanting to try to move up, maybe to get McDuffie,
right? And
who's sharing information to who to let you know where you need to be, other than your own observations.
Yeah.
So. Great stuff. Somebody needs to make a movie that's better than a game day. Make it realistic.
Yeah, people would watch it. If they had a reality show that just followed, yeah, Hard Knocks.
That's got to be coming. There's too much money there that people would watch.